Question back left.
Ryan O'Connell from RTE. Declan, are you saying by that last answer that you will not personally bankroll any of the campaigns in any of the countries where you have set up for the European elections?
No, I won't.
How many candidates do you have so far?
We're going to. We don't want to roll out all of our surprises at once, but we have we don't have a large number of candidates in every one of the 27 member states. So in places like Greece, for example, we're at a very, very early stage. But in places like the UK, Germany, France, and other countries, we've put together an almost full candidate list. The key thing that we have to do is, look, we've got a lot of people coming forward now asking to be candidates. Of course, we want to be able to offer the electorate candidates who are worthy of their trust. You're not going to see, and I've said this from the very beginning, as you probably will remember, you're not going to see large numbers of politicians, the same old faces, under the Libertas banner, because this isn't politics as usual. It's not supposed to be. Politicians, we shouldn't leave politics to politicians.
Will you stand yourself in either Britain or Ireland?
That's something that we'll be talking about perhaps towards the end of this week or early next week.
So you haven't ruled it out?
Oh, absolutely not. But what I have ruled very much in is that Libertas will be standing candidates in every constituency in the UK and in every member state of the European Union, and that they will be quality candidates, not necessarily politicians. There are some great politicians out there. You will see some political names, but you'll see a lot of new, fresh faces. And in terms of if I was to go into this, my ambition would be not to be in it for more than, say, 10 years or something, because I think we need much more churn in the body politic everywhere. I think it would be much better for democracy and much better for refreshing and getting new ideas, etc.
Question front.
Mark Wallace from the Taxpayers Alliance. You mentioned fraud, obviously your support for transparency. In this country, MPs are finally being forced to reveal details of their expenses and allowances claims, whilst MEPs are quite notorious for even worse than the worst debts of Westminster. If any Libertas candidates are successful in the elections, what's your disclosure policy going to be? Will people have the right to see the receipts and invoices?
I think they should absolutely have that right. There's a report in the European Parliament right now, and you're probably aware of it. I think it runs to over €100 million of questionable expenditures, etc. You paid for that as a taxpayer, for that report to be prepared and that investigation to be carried out, but it hasn't been released. It's kept under lock and key. It's absolutely stunning that you paid for an investigation to be carried out where we know that the abuses are in excess of €100 million and you can't see it. But this is where democracy fails. If that was here in the Parliament, there'd be, or anywhere else in Europe, there'd be uproar about it.
If I could just add, on a personal level, as a former British soldier, my salary has been in the public domain for over 21 years, and I think, given the amount of money that the EU wastes and spends on our behalf, I think it's the least that the 500 million citizens across Europe should expect.
Quick question. I was wondering if you could explain the difference between your party and the UK Independent Party, versus the EU.
I think, very simply, the United Kingdom Independent Party are for withdrawal and, to my mind, represent the negative vote. Libertas has a much more positive approach, and that is a strong Europe, but built very firmly, as we've been saying, on democracy, openness and accountability.
So I think you touched on this, or one of you touched on this during your speech, you would characterize Libertas as pro-EU.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we've always said that. The only people that have said otherwise are people like Daniel Cohen-Bendit and Pottering, because they need us to be anti-European because they don't actually have any answers to any of the questions that we're asking. So as long as anybody keeps repeating their false accusations, you're letting them get away with what they want to get away with. Sadly for them, we're pro-European. That's a big problem for them because now they have to start answering real questions.
I think unless there are any final questions. One final question.
Thanks, Professor Prince from the London School of Economics. Question for Mr. Ganley. There are persistent reports in the Irish press that with the problems in your country, 120,000 people in the streets, agriculture in free fall, your government might be inclined to run a referendum again in June. What would you do if that happened?
Ireland is like the rest of Europe, but it's particularly acute in Ireland because we had a what's called a stamp duty, which was an upfront property tax inflated bubble, where we had a government that thought that this would never end. Apparently they were the last people in Europe to think that there was going to be some difficulty with the Irish economy. Some minister said that it was only in last June that they realised that there was going to be a problem, which is just, it really boggles the mind. The Irish people are worried. Families are worried in Ireland. People are losing their jobs. They're facing economically straitened times. But it's not a first for us. I speak with this accent because my parents had to leave the west of Ireland in the 60s. I was born in Watford. I left Ireland in 1987 as an economic migrant. The one thing through our history that the Irish have never been afraid to do is point out injustice. We like the idea of freedom. We like the idea of democracy. We like the idea of accountability. And we've made a point of underlining that for about 700 years now. We are not going to be bullied by anybody, least of all an absolute dismally failed, discredited political establishment in Ireland, not just the government. Because remember, the warning light, the petrol gauge, it wasn't flashing. There were no alarms being sounded by the opposition in Ireland as we headed into these huge economic difficulties. They were saying spend more. The political establishment in Ireland has been exposed. It was exposed in the Lisbon Treaty when the vast majority of voters went out and exercised a very well-informed vote. People who voted yes, and I respect their right to vote that way, they thought they were voting for or against Europe, most of them. And this nonsense continues to be mentioned by some people on that same side. There's 2 places in the world this year where supposedly there are going to be 2 referendums held on the same question. One is Venezuela. Hugo Chavez, who won his second referendum asking the same question, lost it the first time, so he just decided to ask again in true Central American dictatorial style. And the other is Ireland. We're supposed to be asked the same question again. It boggles the mind. The only thing that's even more stunning than that is the fact that you don't get to be asked at all. So I'm entitled to twice as many votes as you. You're not entitled to any. I can have 2. What a wonderful unified European view that is. How ridiculous. The man who thinks he can tax his way out of a recession is the man who thinks he can stand in a bucket and lift it by its handle. We have an absolute... It's tragic. I mean, the leaders that we have right across Europe now, they are just so uninspiring. They have no original ideas. They're not going to lead us to anywhere worth going to. We need to do something about it. And this starts on the 4th of June. Make it count.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your questions.